All right, hello and welcome into another edition of 8Sports Nightcap here on WRC.com, on WRC Plus, our app, everywhere you see the show. Thanks so much for tuning in this week. You saw the title of the video. You know what's going on. Virginia Tech with a massive splash yesterday, finishing their coaching hire, announcing that James Franklin will be the next head coach of the Virginia Tech Hokies. I don't want to say it was a surprise to that many folks that were around this search, fans of the program. Rumors had been flaring. I think every emotion fans felt, optimism, excitement, and then maybe even some doubts down the line that, maybe this wasn't going to happen. And it's huge news for the Virginia Tech program. Obviously, this was something that was worked on since the moment it feels like James Franklin was fired from Penn State. I want show you the press release from yesterday. And it seems like it's a perfect fit from all sides of it, but every positive has its negatives, and we'll get into that as well. But I want to read a couple of quotes to you before we jump into this thing. Virginia Tech has attracted and hired an incredible head coach, an extraordinary recruiter in James Franklin. The Board of Visitors enthusiastically supports this hire. That was said by Rector of the Board of Visitors, John Rakovich. He says, "We signaled to Hokie Nation and the entire nation the shared importance of athletic support and success." We'll jump into that in just a moment. And then I wanted to give you James Franklin's first quote as head coach of Virginia Tech. "I'm honored and humbled to join the Hokie family. My vision is simple: to restore unmatched excellence, to build something that lasts, and to serve the university, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and our amazing fan base with honor, integrity, and passion. I look forward to getting to work with our players, our staff, and the entire Virginia Tech community." Now, James Franklin will be introduced at a press conference on Wednesday morning, where I think we'll learn a lot. It's open to the public, so it's probably going to be more so like when Ryan Odom was hired at UVA for basketball. It was a pep rally, right? It wasn't really a press conference. After every question, people are going to be clapping. But it'll be very interesting to see James Franklin, probably rocking some Virginia Tech memorabilia tomorrow. And to kind of dive into this thing, I figured we'd go back to the start of the coaching search. We brought in, of course, my good friend and colleague David Cunningham to discuss what was next for Virginia Tech after they hired Brent Pry. I think that was the week after that happened, and now here we are about 2 months later, and Virginia Tech has hired their guy in James Franklin. It's Virginia Tech insider, reporter for TechSideline.com, David Cunningham. Thanks so much for stopping by. I know it's a busy week for you, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
I think we'll start with just what were, your initial reaction when you got the text message that, hey, this thing has been approved. James Franklin is the next head coach of Virginia Tech.
Well, I think a lot of people didn't see it coming because you think back to when Brent Pry was fired back in September. James Franklin was coaching Penn State. They were 3-0, number 2 team in the country. And you fast forward 2 months just over, and James Franklin's going to be introduced tomorrow as the next Virginia Tech head coach. It's moved fast. Coaching searches are not meant to be 2 months long. They're usually meant to be 2 or 3 weeks. And this, of course, has dragged, and there's been a lot of information floating around, a lot of rumors. But over the last 2 weeks or so, maybe even a little bit longer than that, James Franklin's kind of been the guy that everybody's focused on, and the rumors have swirled around him.
Yep.
And we got confirmation. We got confirmation kind of like Friday night, Friday, Saturday, that this thing was legit and it could be done as soon as the weekend. And of course, Monday afternoon, 4 o'clock, it gets announced. And the Hokies officially announced it at 6. So it's been quite the whirlwind, and it kind of went from "there's no way this is going to happen" to "oh my gosh, this is really happening."
Yeah.
And I think instant reaction is, this is a coach that has won more than just about any other hire that the ACC has ever made at the college level, I should say.
Yeah.
Bill Belichick, of course, won a couple Super Bowls in the NFL and is in North Carolina now. But the only other guy that really maybe stacks up against James Franklin is Mark Richt, who was terrific at Georgia before going to Miami. Otherwise, it's James Franklin.
Yeah.
And this is a guy who has been to multiple New Year's Six bowl games. He won a Big Ten title. He went to the Big Ten title game last year. He was in the college football playoff semifinal, and it was a couple plays away from playing for a national championship game. And he's now coaching Virginia Tech. That is just a crazy sentence. And I think the Hokies had to have a lot of things go right. They did. And the committee had to do a lot of work on this. There are a lot of people that deserve a lot of credit on this, but um, man, the Hokies got it across the finish line. And it still doesn't feel real a little bit. I think it will tomorrow on Wednesday morning when he walks into Castle Coliseum to enter Sandman and or Tech Triumph, I guess, and they introduce him, and it's just kind of crazy. He showed up at the Board of Visitors meeting this morning
Yeah, I saw that.
in Alexandria and kind of surprised everybody there. And of course, some of the Board of Visitors members are the people who made the decision. But it's just kind of surreal that James Franklin is this program's head coach. Kind of a complete 180 from it feels like from where the Hokies were, back in September when they fired Brent Pry after an 0-3 start.
Yeah, so let's look at James Franklin's resume, because some of our viewers maybe aren't all that familiar with James Franklin. They're trying to maybe learn who he is, and maybe they cover or rather follow college football at a surface level. He was the head coach at Vanderbilt, and kind of back when Vanderbilt never won games. I mean, Vanderbilt was pathetic before James Franklin showed up. Was able to win 9 games twice at Vanderbilt, go to 3 bowl games, and then he was hired at Penn State. Took over a program that had so many NCAA sanctions. I mean, they were in the cellar. They were struggling. I mean, it was not the Penn State of today, and he built up that program to be what it is today. Took them to the Rose Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, won the Rose Bowl, the Peach Bowl, and then, as you mentioned, obviously last year in the 2024 college football playoff semifinal, multiple 10-win seasons. He's finished inside the top 10 all of these times. And so when you just look at this resume, it's so obvious that it's such a great hire, but there are fans out there, I think a lot of people maybe that are privy to, the Penn State program that are questioning this hire as to say, why would you want to bring in somebody that another school, pushed off and said, we don't want him, he's not good enough for us. What is your argument back to those people that are maybe scratching their heads about this hire that maybe don't know Virginia Tech's situation very well?
Well, look at where the Hokies are.
Yeah.
The Hokies they started 0-3 this year. They've got an interim head coach. They have struggled over the last couple of years. Virginia Tech's last 9 win season, I think, came in 2019 or 2017. I mean, you have to go back a long time to find the last time they won 8 or 9 games. This is not a Virginia Tech program right now that can that has much going for it. Brent Pry, he was a great culture fit, but he was not a very good coach and did not win very many games. He could not do the most he could with this talent. And you bring in a guy in James Franklin, who some people might question it. I think he was by far and away the best coach available. And I think had Penn State not been the one to fire him, Penn State probably would have been the one to hire him because he fits Penn State so well.
Yep.
It's honestly kind of amazing that he was even on the market in the first place. I think the Hokies, compared to what they were going through, compared to what these fans, I mean, who have shown up to every game still despite a terrible season, they deserve something like this. And I think they are so overjoyed because this is a serious hire. You look at this and go, why would James Franklin want to go to Virginia Tech? Why would Virginia Tech want somebody with James Franklin's resume, but he was just fired? It's like, well, that doesn't mean he's a bad coach because he was just almost in the national championship game last year. Maybe Penn State overreacted. I think that's probably the card that the Hokies are playing. Yeah, Penn State probably overreacted a little bit. It's one of those things where you can't necessarily change what the big time donors think, right? If they're
Yeah.
out on somebody, it's really hard to swing how they feel. But at the same time, I would say that Virginia Tech got a steal of sorts. I don't know if that's what the best way to describe it. Maybe more of a coup. I mean, you're talking about the Hokies are probably the only, in terms of geographically, positioned university or program that was open in this cycle that really fit his recruiting area, which is he coached at Penn State. He coached at Vanderbilt. He was previously at Maryland. He's been at James Madison.
Yep.
He's from Pennsylvania. This is his region. And Virginia Tech, don't get it twisted. Hokies are pouring a ton of money and a ton of resources into this. but they are legit. I think this signals that the Hokies are serious about football again. Nolan, I equate it to when you were in school at Virginia Tech and the Hokies hired Buzz Williams in men's basketball because it
Absolutely.
was a program that Virginia Tech did not invest a ton of funds in, a ton of resources in for a very long time. And the Hokies went out and got a proven head coach. And Franklin, I think, has a better resume than Buzz Williams did when Buzz Williams was hired.
Absolutely.
And James Franklin is one of the probably top five, top 10 coaches in the country, and he was let go. And the fact that he has landed at Virginia Tech, it's pretty amazing. And that's why I think it's so hard still to just grasp a little bit because he is that good of a coach. He is that good. He could turn this program around very quickly. He's going to have the resources to do so. And I think the Hokies lucked out a little bit because they beat everybody in this cycle. Like everybody else is still waiting and trying to figure out who their coach is. It's been such a chaotic coaching cycle and search and carousel over these last couple months. There's still 2 weeks left in the regular season, and the Hokies have their guy. It's kind of just crazy to think about how this all unfolded. And again, James Franklin, I think, can hit the ground running because he has the resources to do so, thanks to all the support that Virginia Tech has kind of poured in. And that is something I think that separates the Hokies from other schools that were potentially trying to get him.
Absolutely. And I think something that can't be forgotten, and another thing that I think a lot of folks, across the country and the state aren't all that familiar with, is that meeting back in, what was it, September or August, the BOV meeting where they approved this massive budget increase of $250 million. If that doesn't happen, this hire today doesn't happen. Right. And a big part of that fundraising thing, and there's a lot more to it than, obviously I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an economics guy, but I am aware that a large part of the portion of this new budget that's supposed to go into the Virginia Tech Athletics Fund is supposed to come from donations, right? They're expecting the fan base to be able to fundraise more money. And hiring a guy like James Franklin, a name that everyone's so familiar with, the face that everyone's so familiar with, it kind of reminds me of, Colorado's donations going up when Deion Sanders was hired over in for the Buffaloes. And this kind of feels like a similar situation of getting a name like James Franklin, someone who has the resume and success of James Franklin. Maybe those fans and will donate more money, and that fundraising effort would go a lot more smoothly than if Virginia Tech was forced to hire maybe a really qualified offensive coordinator or a coach that folks aren't all that familiar with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the other guys that had been on Virginia Tech's board was James Madison's Bob Chesney, right up the road on
Yeah.
81. And he's a terrific coach who's won a lot of different places everywhere he's been. And I think there's a chance that he ends up somewhere else and has a terrific career at a bigger school this upcoming season. But you would not be pouring in the same kind of resources as far as some of the salaries and what you're going to give for assistants if you're hiring somebody who doesn't necessarily have the track record James Franklin does. And that's the separator. James Franklin has this fantastic track record.
Yeah.
You showed his resume. He's won all of these big time games. He's played in these big time games. Some people might go, well, James Franklin's lost a lot of big time games. You have to be able to get to the big games to
Yeah.
be able to win or lose them. And the Hokies have not played in any big games any time recently. I mean, the last time that Virginia Tech was nationally relevant, you could say maybe a little bit in 2019 when the Hokies were a win away from making the winning the Coastal Division and making the ACC title game. If not, you have to go back to 2017 when they hosted College Game Day. That was, I believe, your senior year of college.
It was.
I mean, Hokies had Clemson coming into town for College Game Day. That was probably the last time that the Hokies were genuinely nationally relevant in college football. We're talking 8 years ago, and now you get James Franklin, and Virginia Tech is back in the national picture, and quickly too.
The amount of excitement around the fan base I kind of want to get into, because it was like the greatest thing that's ever happened to Virginia Tech athletics was the reaction from most of the fan base, especially for, how many weeks that this kind of went on in terms of people speculating whether or not it was going to be James Franklin. The message boards were going crazy. There was selfies with Bud Foster on a tarmac. There was real estate talk, catering talk. I mean, the hoopla around this entire search was so enjoyable to kind of see from afar, and then to see it pay off with excitement, and it being the coach that it seems like just about everyone thought was the best coach available. It's a pretty cool moment for the fans to be excited about something, because as you mentioned, I mean, the Hokies haven't been able to be excited probably since that 2019 season. It's been tough sledding for Virginia Tech the past few years.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Virginia Tech fans had a little bit of hope after Justin Fuente was fired and the Hokies brought in Brent Pry. But Brent Pry did not really pan out. I mean, that first season in 2022, it's not like they hit the ground running at all. They won 3 games. They were much better and ended the season on a high in 2023. And then in 2024, when they had all these expectations and all these guys coming back, they only won 6 games.
Yeah.
And it's one of these things where they've continually underachieved. Nolan, you talked earlier about the board of visitors and that approval. That is huge in this entire thing. And I think up until yesterday, Monday, when James Franklin was announced, that was the most exciting thing that happened around the Virginia Tech football program recently.
Yeah.
Aside from a win over Cal and a win over NC State, which were a little bit surprising, I think. The Hokies the Board of Visitors approving that kind of funds, a lot of which is going directly to this football program. It says that the Hokies are here to play big boy football. Like they're not here to mess around anymore. They're here to go out and get a big time coach, which they just did in James Franklin. They're going to hire a big time staff, and they're going to have the resources to go recruit guys and compete with some of the big boys. And Nolan, it doesn't necessarily take a long time to get programs back up and running anymore. You look up the
Yeah.
road from you guys in Charlottesville and what Tony Elliott has done, and just in terms of revamping this team this year, right? That is what happens when you've got a good general manager and a good front office staff, because that's what we're going to call it now, because that's essentially what it is. When you have guys that can go out and evaluate the right talent and bring them in, and you've got the resources to do so, just look at Kurt Signetti and what he's done going from
Absolutely.
James Madison to Indiana. Indiana's a top 2 team in the country this year. Indiana, for crying out loud. What's to say the Hokies can't do that? And also, look at who James Franklin was competing against in the Big Ten, the Michigans and the Ohio States of the world. Who's he got to compete in the ACC right now? I mean, Clemson, yes, is pretty good. Miami, yes, pretty good. But both of them are up and down, a little bit hit or miss. And Florida State hasn't been great these last 2 years. The teams at the top of the ACC right now are Georgia Tech and Pitt and Virginia and SMU and Louisville. Who's to say that the Hokies, with these kind of resources and this caliber of a coach, can't hit the ground running immediately and go win in the ACC?
Absolutely. It's an interesting time in the ACC, especially with the downfalls of who you would think would be so talented. I mean, look at next year's schedule, and at first you see, Miami and I think, is it Clemson or Florida State's on it as well? It's like that's not
Clemson.
the Miami and Clemson that I think you would think of when you originally, I kind of glance at that roster. But to kind of talk about, obviously the numbers aren't out on James Franklin, and we talk about the buy-in from the university. I mean, it sounds like this is going to be north of $10 million per year for James Franklin. He's going to become the highest, state employee in the state of Virginia. That's a lot of money going to him. There was a lot of discussion about this NIL pool is going to be very large and competitive. There's a lot of funds being put into this situation. And I think if you want to play devil's advocate, if this goes poorly, this could be a disaster for Virginia Tech if James Franklin, can't do what I think a lot of people are expecting him to do. But is this also a situation of you invest all this money because being successful brings in so much money?
Yeah, Nolan, it's one of these things where if you look back at what Wood Babcock presented to the Board of Visitors back in August, he basically made a direct correlation to, hey, here's what the value of hosting a home college football playoff game brings in. Here's what being on television brings in, big time television like ESPN, ABC, now that the ACC has this revenue distribution model. There's money out there. but you have to put in the resources. You have to spend money to make money. That's just how it is nowadays. If things go poorly, this will be maybe Virginia Tech as a university biggest financial payout in terms of not going well it's maybe ever had. If James Franklin and things go south in a couple of years, I don't know necessarily what the buyout is because yes, we don't have the numbers yet, and I expect we'll have them on Wednesday at the press conference. But I imagine that this is not a necessarily financially good deal for Virginia Tech if it had to buy out James Franklin. But at the same time, you put all your chips in a coach that's been to all these New Year's Six games and has won all of this and is a terrific recruiter too. I mean, all these high school coaches around the Commonwealth, including in Richmond, rave about James Franklin. They love James Franklin. They love sending their guys to go play for him. And he had been in a thorn in Virginia Tech's side recruiting
Yeah.
wise for the last decade. And even going back farther, going back to Vanderbilt. And he's won everywhere he's been. He builds terrific staffs, and the Hokies are giving him the resources. It's one of these things where if you're Virginia Tech, what option did you have? I mean, it didn't matter who your next coach was. You were going to pour in resources.
Yeah, that's a
But
good
if
point.
you can go out and get a James Franklin caliber coach, a coach who has won as much as he's won, and the Hokies have met from everything we understand, every single financial ask from James Franklin throughout this entire process. We'll find out hopefully exactly what those numbers are,
Hmm.
but it's not cheap. But in this era, you have to spend money if you want to win and in turn make money back. And it's again, it's easy to turn a program around if you do that. It's not guaranteed. Money doesn't necessarily guarantee success, but it sure makes things a lot easier. And when
Yeah.
you are funding this program like Virginia Tech is going to over these next couple years with James Franklin at the helm, you're going to be in good shape. I think the Hokies are immediately one of the top contenders in the ACC for next season. And we don't even know who the heck is going to be on this roster because he's going to have all of these funds, all of these resources to go out and get whoever he wants and go out and hire whatever staff he wants. And that's not necessarily a luxury that a lot of the other teams around the ACC can do.
You brought up a couple of good points. I kind of want to talk about how good of a recruiter he was. I sat down last night and looked at Penn State's all-time recruits list. About a fourth of those guys are from Virginia, and even an eighth of them are from the Richmond area that have had a lot of success at Penn State. Have gone on to the NFL, and then I sat down and thought about how different would have looked if all those players went to Penn State. What if they had gone to Virginia Tech and did the math on how many 4 stars and 5? It would have been ridiculous. Now, granted, Penn State's still going to recruit this area. Whoever ends up there, that's still going to be a battle. But it's better to have James Franklin put at Virginia Tech than him at Penn State. Another thing you mentioned, and it kind of reminds me of a lot of when Virginia Tech hired Buzz Williams, and I'm hearing the comparison between Buzz Williams and James Franklin, and that the coach becomes the program. It was nice having Buzz Williams in Blacksburg and winning games, even if it was Buzz Williams. It was his program. I think James Franklin and Penn State kind of reminded me of that. What else reminded me of that is when Virginia Tech hired Buzz Williams. It was the week of the NCAA tournament. Buzz Williams was on every single broadcast, previewing games with the Virginia Tech pin on. And it reminded me of James Franklin on College Game Day the other day, being a guy that the media likes, and the fact that this media circus and hype that Buzz Williams kind of had. The same thing is for James Franklin. What other coach gets fired and is invited on College Game Day the next week, right? So I think that's another interesting tidbit of, how Virginia Tech's brand awareness and the marketability of their brand will raise just by having James Franklin on campus. And then talking about recruiting again, we've already seen a boatload of, I've lost count now of how many Penn State commits have announced that they're going to be at the Virginia Tech game against Miami on Saturday. I don't think they're going to see a great game from the Hokies based off of where their roster is at currently, but to see the atmosphere and the excitement and that should be around the Tech program now that they have their head coach, it'll be interesting to see how much just in this recruiting cycle with however many days it is away for National Signing Days, how many commits the Hokies will get from, maybe former Penn State guys or guys that weren't on Virginia Tech boards.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic because rarely do you see a coach that comes in have an opportunity for at least one home football weekend in terms of recruiting for the cycle having just landed on campus. That's what James Franklin will be able to do. He will have a ton of recruits in town this weekend, and you've seen it. He hasn't been announced barely 24 hours, and there are tons of kids that are announcing, "Hey, I'm going to visit Virginia Tech this week," or "Hey, I've been offered by the Hokies." And I think you'll see it a little bit in the immediacy of this, where you'll see a bunch of guys signing these about 15 days away. I think you'll see some kind of influx over these next 2 weeks of guys committing to the Hokies. But I think you'll really see it in these next couple of recruiting classes, the
Yeah,
2027 class next year, where James Franklin is now recruiting for the Hokies, and he's got an entire cycle to get these guys in the boat. Man, this is big time for Virginia Tech. The Hokies have never really had a recruiter as a head coach in terms of this magnitude.
absolutely.
Frank Beamer was a pretty good recruiter, but more than anything, I think he had good staffers who could recruit, and he was a good developer of talent.
Absolutely.
James Franklin is a gutsy recruiter, man. He loves the grind, he loves recruiting. And I think the Hokies will be better in that aspect for it. And that's not Nolan even counting the transfer portal, which of course doesn't open until January this
Yeah,
year due to the NCAA rules. He's got plenty of time. You're talking a month plus for him to look over the roster over these next 2 weeks, evaluate the roster, figure out what needs, what he needs to go after in the transfer portal, figure out his staff, and then when January hits, go get those guys. And the Hokies again are going to have the funds to do so. You touched on the Buzz Williams comparison in terms of the media. I mean, James Franklin is a well-spoken individual. He is somebody who is not afraid to get up in front of a group of people and speak. And that's what you need as a head coach. You
absolutely.
need a spokesperson, and not just for the football program, but for the university. And I think he gives the Hokies fans somebody to rally around. I think a lot of Virginia Tech fans see this as a sign of hope, a sign of, hey, we can get back to winning football games again. And that's something that the Hokies haven't experienced for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have a question for you. You might not know the answer, but I'd like for you to speculate, if you will. We've seen all these players announce they're going to be at the game on at Miami on Saturday, and it happened pretty quick. And because James Franklin wasn't hired by any schools, he had the ability to kind of continue to talk with his recruits and stuff. Do you think that's all on James Franklin getting these guys, calling these guys, or do you think he kind of already has this shadow staff or a couple of guys that have been working with him without a badge to play for, essentially?
Well, think about it like this. We've heard that he was contacting recruits before he even accepted the Virginia Tech job. Back when you would say he would be a citizen when he's in the same boat as you and I.
Yeah,
He can talk to whatever recruits he wants. Um, now he's the head coach, and now he's got something to pitch. And it seems like the current Virginia Tech recruiting staff has really helped out a lot in terms of getting visits organized and set up. But it's going to happen very fast. It's going to be very chaotic, and I think you're going to see just this giant influx of high school guys. Hokies only have 8 commits right now in this
yeah,
class. It's a very, very small class, and not rated very highly, in part because of the numbers. I think I would expect the Hokies to get maybe 10 guys at least in this class in the next 2 weeks, if not more. And it's not even just the number of guys, it's the caliber of guys.
absolutely.
There's a top 100 kid or two, I think, that might be turning an eye to Virginia Tech now and going, man, James Franklin's at Virginia Tech? I've never taken a visit there. I would love to go see what the Hokies are about. His reach, especially in this area of the United States, this area of the country, is magnificent. He recruits better than most in this area of the country. And the fact that he used to be recruiting against the Hokies and stealing, top 10 kids from the Commonwealth over the last decade, and now he's going to be doing that for Virginia Tech. How many of these guys can you keep? You mentioned Penn State's still going to recruit well. Yeah, but they're going to recruit against James Franklin now. And
Yeah.
that's a completely different animal than recruiting against Brent Pry. And that's nothing against Brent Pry, but he didn't have the pull that James Franklin does. Nobody does. And I think that could potentially be a game changer for the Hokies.
Yeah, and another thing that we're going a little long here, but it's breaking news for Virginia Tech. It's unbelievable. One thing that when I've had some conversations with some friends and some colleagues about why would Virginia Tech, hire this guy who was ousted by another school that he can't win the big game. It doesn't make sense. I think it makes total sense in terms of the why he had success or how he had success at Penn State. Happy Valley's not an easy place to get to. It's not easy to recruit. It's not like Columbus where it's a big city. It's a huge airport. There's a lot going on, a lot of money being thrown around. It's a lot like Blacksburg. I mean, the similarities between Penn State and Virginia Tech are numerous. The town's very similar. The airport's small. It's not easy to get to, and he was able to have all that success in Happy Valley. It's the same situation here in Blacksburg, and it'll be interesting to see if he can continue that success. I don't think it's going to be quite as easy as he had it, last recruiting cycle because he had already built this big brand in Penn State, and it's a little easier, to recruit somebody when you just played for the national championship. And I will not be surprised if there's, some growing pains with learning the land. But after a couple of years, if not, just this season with the transfer portal, I could see it going really well. And I kind of want to put you on the spot, David, because we kind of have been all happy Gilmore about this whole situation, how great it is for Virginia Tech. What are the downsides? Is there any doubts in your mind? What's a bad scenario? Can this turn south? There's been plenty of hires that have been made that people have labeled an A+ hire, can't go wrong, and it goes wrong. Is there any doubt in your mind that this could go poorly for Virginia Tech, and maybe lay that scenario out? And we'll be a little pessimistic for maybe our fans that are not excited about the fact that Penn State or James Franklin's headed to Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a way you can find a little negativity out of it. I don't know about an exact scenario, but think about the things that hurt Virginia Tech in the past. You look back at the Justin Fuente era, and I think a lot of people would argue that he did not recruit the Commonwealth well at all. His recruiting ties were not that strong. That came back to bite him. And you could also say that there were inside forces kind of pulling against him a little bit. Not everybody was aligned in the athletic department and at the university level at Virginia Tech under Justin Fuente. Okay, well, the Hokies are a little bit better in that area under Brent Pry. It doesn't work out necessarily because he hires the wrong coordinators. He hires some wrong staff members that just weren't very good coaches. You get off on the wrong foot, and I don't think he was a very good coach himself in terms of game management, clock management, stuff like that. Well, you got the alignment now, though. My biggest thing is James Franklin has to get these coordinating hires right from the start. It sounds like he's already figured out a lot of his staff and maybe what Penn State guys he wants to come join, but also where he wants to go elsewhere and what guys he wants to retain. But the Hokies have to have the right coordinators in place because that impacts everything. That's something that they did not have under Brent Pry. He hired two first-time coordinators as a first-time head coach. If you get those coordinating hires wrong, you are set back for a very long time. He had to fire one, and then the other one left because he saw the writing on the wall a little bit.
Yep.
There's always reasons for pessimism, but I think you're looking at a guy in James Franklin who you can look at some of his in-game coaching and question it, I think. But what you can't necessarily question is how good of a CEO of a program he is. I think he just runs things very well. Hokies have this giant influx of money coming in from this Board of Visitors thing. I think you've got a coach now in James Franklin who knows what to do with that kind of money. He's been at a big boy school, and you've got everybody at Virginia Tech aligned now. That Board of Visitors quote you read out this earlier, at the beginning, it was the first quote in that press release the Hokies put out yesterday. That is huge. Everyone is on the same page with this hire. You've got everybody working together. There are reasons for pessimism, but I think this is as sure of a hire as you can get because this is a guy who is a proven winner everywhere he's been. And you just don't get that very often.
And the last thing I want to bring up, you've brought up Brent Pry a couple of times. For those that don't know, Brent Pry was the defense coordinator in James Franklin for multiple years, had a lot of success. Those are two guys that are close friends and remained close friends when Brent Pry left Penn State to come to Virginia Tech. And it would have been pretty easy, I think, for Brent Pry to talk bad, maybe about the Ben administration or the resources at Virginia Tech. But clearly, Brent Pry enjoyed his time in Blacksburg, and I would imagine helped finish off the deal to get James Franklin there by, I would imagine saying, good things about his experience in Blacksburg, which I don't think is a big surprise to a lot of people, because when you were on a few months back and we talked about Brent Pry, everyone likes Brent Pry. I think everyone wanted Brent Pry to succeed. The results just weren't there. Do you have any information on if he played any sort of role, or do you think that he had any sort of role in maybe helping getting the ball across the goal line here?
Yeah, I mean, Pry and Franklin have been great friends for a very long time. Their connection goes back to their Vanderbilt days. You're talking over a decade ago. And their wives are very good friends. And from people I've talked to, it sounds like Amy Pry, Brent Pry's wife, was very influential as far as talking to James Franklin's wife and their family and explaining what the situation in Blacksburg's like to live as a family and what that can be. You don't want to move your family to a place that is not a great place to live.
No.
And as far as Brent Pry, I think, yeah, he clearly had a lot of conversations with James Franklin, just about what to expect. And I think James Franklin is walking into this situation where he understands the entire landscape. He might not have been in that building before, but he understands what Virginia Tech has, doesn't have, what you can expect when you walk in there as a head coach, what the resources are like. You mentioned that. I think James Franklin has a good understanding of, you would say, the good, bad, and the ugly from Brent Pry, and just kind of what you can expect as a head coach there, and what the fans are like, and how supportive the administration is. Those are things that you can't necessarily replicate if you're James Franklin, where say you're interested in Arkansas or Florida State, and you don't necessarily know somebody with previous information that has been there before. That makes things a little bit difficult if you try to go there and you're kind of walking in like maybe Justin Fuente did at Virginia Tech,
Yeah.
walking in not really sure what you're going to expect. James Franklin should not have that problem.
Perfect, David. Well, thanks so much for stopping by. I know it's a busy time of year for you. I think you've been on some beat of a basketball game or now football every single day. So appreciate your time for stopping by. How can our friends find your work?
Yeah, much appreciated, Nolan. It's been a very busy time, and it's only going to get busier because when the head coach is hired, there's so much going on. You got recruiting and staff hires, and all he's going to do. You talked about everything Buzz Williams is on television. I can guarantee you that James Franklin's going to be rolled out everywhere. Well, if you want to keep up with everything going on with James Franklin, go to techsideline.com, take out a subscription today. You can also listen to our podcast and everything we talk about. Just search Tech Sideline Podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We recorded an emergency podcast at 5 o'clock yesterday, an hour after James Franklin was fired. So we were ready for it. We were waiting. It's been a whirlwind the last 24 hours, but I'm excited to see where this goes. And honestly, Nolan, more than anything, I'm just excited that I think a lot of fans feel happy again, like they have hope.
Absolutely, David. Thanks so much. I'll be speaking with you soon. Thanks, David.
Absolutely.
Good night, everybody.